streets underwater.
Y'all know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and welcome to part 3 of Cartel Business. Now, let's get straight to it. Hector, he finds out that the cartel that he's been working for was one of the cartels in the shootout that killed his wife. Now, what he don't know is if the cartel is the one that actually shot and killed her. But he knows that it was one of those cartels in the shootout that day that his wife, the mother of his son Miguel, was taken away. And now he wants to find out, is this the cartel? One of the people in this particular cartel, are they the ones responsible for his wife's death? And he wants to find that out. But it's going to be hard for him to find that out. Because even though he's part of the cartel now, or the worker, he's not what they call a blood oath cartel member. You feel what I'm saying? He's a worker, but he's not one of those individuals that is part of like leadership. One of those individuals that is taking an oath to the lifestyle. You understand what I'm saying? It's almost like, you have people that, I'm going to break it down for you. Like when you got in the dope game, right? You got your people, you got your brick players and all this and that, right? And people over them, right? But then beneath all of that, you got people that come and buy the dope and sell it retail on the streets. Those individuals that selling those things on the streets, they're not part of this crew. They're just workers. They're just people that are buying. Now, keep in mind that it's a little bit more sophisticated than that when you deal with cartels. But at the end of the day, what I want you to understand is that Hector is not like a fully partnered up individual as far as the cartel. He has agreed to join the cartel in business ventures. You feel what I'm saying? But he don't claim the cartel like a family. You understand? That's just what the difference is. So anyway, he sets out to try to find out, is this the cartel that is responsible for the death of his wife? Now, here's the thing. One of the things that happens, when stuff like this happens is an investigation. And most of the time, those investigations are flawed because you find a lot of people, in these particular countries that are paid off by the cartels to not really dig into the issue. And then sometimes they don't care if they dig into them at all. They're still not going to find out anything because they are often tie up loose ends and kill the individuals that might lead the police back to them. But Hector was determined to find out, and he had some money to spread around to find things out. And that's how this stuff works. So Hector gets in touch with his grandparents, with Miguel's grandparents, which is his wife Maria's parents, okay? He calls them and he talks to them. He tells them that he thinks that he might have information about who and which cartel is responsible for Maria's death. But he needs them to inquire to the police about the investigation and if they are investigating at all, like they said they would. So they agree to make that call, but they know that this could be risky and dangerous to them because if the cartels find out that family members of someone that they killed accidentally or not is looking into the issue to try to see what the police are going to do about it, they might decide to kill them. But they didn't care. They wanted to know who killed their daughter. They wanted to know. They wanted justice. So they called out to the police station, Hector said, and they talked to the detectives. The detectives tell them that they just don't have any leads. They don't have any leads. They don't have anything to match ballistics or anything like that. They just know that the two gangs that were involved were in a shootout. They don't know anything more than that. But they do know that the two gangs that were involved are the main drug traffickers in that country. And they're connected to a bigger cartel out of Colombia. A bigger cartel. Use your imagination. You understand? So when that information gets back to Hector, Hector knows now that the cartel that he's a part of is one of the cartels that was in the shootout. For sure, for fact. Because the detective gave the name of the cartel to Maria's parents. So now he's like a dog with a bone. He can't let go. He wants to find out what really happened, but to find out, he's going to have to start to make friends with individuals that are in the cartel. But those individuals in the cartel that engage in those type of activity, they're not the ones that's mainly selling drugs, y'all. They're not the ones mainly selling drugs. You see these people riding around with them guns and they doing all that shooting. That's the security for the organization. That's the muscle. They're the ones that come when it's a problem. Somebody gonna die. And that's the tragedy in this, right? When you see them coming, somebody's already made a decision for something to happen. Or they're protecting somebody, or they're transporting some money. Something like that, right? So to make friends with these individuals, you got to get grimy. Because they don't talk. They don't talk. They do not talk. I remember running into a young dude like that years ago that he told me he was a hitman for one of the organizations like that, right? I won't call the name of it. But he told me by the time he was 13, he had 5 bodies. Imagine that. They get them young. They indoctrinate them and get them young. So for Hector to find out the information that he wanted to find out, he was going to have to start rubbing elbows with some people that were really, really grimy. And there was a couple of people assigned to every house that he was responsible for, right? A couple of people assigned to every house that he was responsible for security. So he started talking to him, and he's trying to find anybody that could tell him who was involved in that particular shootout that day. Who amongst the security, and the security people, they always know who's here, who's there, because it's like a unit. It's like a paramilitary unit. It's a paramilitary unit. And they know, they have their assignments just like the military has assignments. You might be stationed at Fort Campbell. You might be stationed at Cherry Point. You might be stationed at this base in Georgia. You might be stationed here. But you got a duty station. And the people that are involved in the cartels as responsible for security, you might get assigned to this particular area, this particular state for certain amount of time, and then they might up and move you somewhere else, right? So a lot of the people that were assigned to that particular area that day in Honduras, other people that are involved in the security aspect of the cartels, they know. And if they don't know, they can find out who was assigned to those areas. But you got to be careful when you ask those questions, because those are just not questions that you ask when you're involved in illegal activities. Who was there that day? That's a police question. So he's got to tread lightly. He's got to tread lightly. And he's got to make them believe that he's just as menacing and as wicked as they are. So in order for him to prove that, he starts to get aggressive with some of the people that he's responsible for in those houses. And again, he convinces himself that he's doing this for the greater good. His mind has become so diluted that he thinks that whatever he does is justified. That's what the game will do to you. It will have you just tricking yourself. Tricking yourself. And whatever you do, you think is cool, as long as you get to whatever you're trying to achieve. You feel me? And that just can't be the way we do. The means can't always justify the ends. It can't be. You shouldn't be allowed to do anything to get to whatever it is that you're trying to get to, whatever the goal is, if it requires you to mistreat another human being. But Hector had lost sight of that. He had lost his way. So now some of the people in the house, and he was only doing it to put on a show, but he had to be brutal. So some of the people that were in the house that were drinking when they were not supposed to be drinking or using drugs and all these type of things, they would attract the police if the neighbors heard the noise or anything like that. He would get really physical with them. And he would tell the security to take them out back. And they would beat them. They would beat them, knocking them out unconscious and laying them down and all of this old kind of stuff. And he would do these things because he wanted them to see him as one of them. And it worked. After a few months, let me tell you something. Some of these people that own these security details are sadistic. And you don't always have to do something to get beat up. So after a few months, when they just were in the mood to hurt somebody, they would go to Hector and talk about this person or that person. We're going to take this person out back and rough them up. And the individual that they might be talking about is just somebody that just got off of work and he's laying down in the bunk and he's sleeping. And they just want to get their jolly, so they grab him up out of the bunk and take him out back and beat him for a few minutes and think it's funny. And Hector would agree with it. And sometimes he even participated in it. At first, he felt bad because he didn't want Miguel to see him doing that. But after a while, he started to pretend so much that he enjoyed it that he started to enjoy it. He started to enjoy it. And they knew it. So they kicked it with him every day. And they started to talk about him to their superiors, the people that were involved in security. And as they got more familiar with Hector and his brutal ways, and he was one of those individuals that was making sure that the money was coming in. He was making sure that, that the people supposed to be at work were at work. He was making sure that the women that were in these adult houses, you know what I'm talking about, were taking care of their business, and everybody was happy. The cartel is happy when money is moving. And as long as no complaints get to them, they're cool. And Hector was making sure that he was becoming the individual that they could rely on and that they could trust. So when the day came and he was asking questions about what happened that day, that fateful day, a few years back in Honduras, that they didn't even question his motives. They didn't question his motives. They looked at it as if this is just something that they were talking about, because you know how it gets when you're involved in a lot of criminal activities, and some days you might be sitting down and you're reminiscing about this and you're reminiscing about that. It's basically you're bragging. So they looked at it like that. They're like, yeah, we was there. We were there. We know what happened. Blah, 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 this, and that. They were just saying all of these types of things. And then they was like, well, yeah, I heard a few people got killed. He's like, yeah, it was quite a few people that got laid down and killed, but it was a joyous day for the cartel, as they say. It was a joyous day for the cartel. And Hector, he had to maintain his composure, because that was the day his wife died. That was the day Miguel's mother died. But he had to pretend that it was a joyous day for the cartel. It was the day that a message was sent that this is our territory, as the other cartel members were saying while Hector was listening. And they high-fived and they drank liquor and all of the things that you do when you're happy and excited about something. They did it. But while they were doing it, they were not paying attention to Hector's facial expressions. Because, see, some things you just can't hide. Some things you just cannot hide. And the anger that was boiling up inside of him, he couldn't hide. But they were so drunk. They couldn't see it. And that was good for him that they couldn't see it. It was fortunate for him that they couldn't see it. It was fortunate for him that he held his composure. Because they didn't even notice that the Glock 9 that he had always in his back of his pants was in his hands now. And he was staring them down. And he was looking at them. Because see, the room that they were in, it was like dim. The lights was dim and all this and that because, it was nighttime and the people in there that had come from work, they were in there asleep. And so they were in the other room talking and they didn't want to have, a lot of lights on at nighttime because they didn't want to attract the police. Everybody in the neighborhood was asleep. So they had to make sure that, things looked normal. So they didn't notice that he had his gun in his hand while they laughed and joked and talked about that was a glorious day for the cartel. They noticed none of that. They noticed none of that. And while he had that gun in his hand, he could feel himself pulling that trigger and hitting him right in the head, knocking him down. But he decided that this wasn't the time. This wasn't the time. So he slowly took his hand off the trigger and put the gun back down in his pants behind his back and then covered it up with his shirt and continued to laugh. He had become a master at pretending. He had become a master at pretending. A few minutes later, he told them, it's enough for him. He was going to bed. He had learned everything that he needed to learn. He knew that the cartel that he was working for was the cartel that killed his wife and the son and the mother of his son. He knew it. Now, he didn't know the individual, but he knew that he was working for that very cartel. So he went to bed that night, and he lay there in the bed. He's drunk, too, head spinning like a top while he's laying there. And he's thinking, I got to find out who did this. And if I don't find out who did this, then all of them going to pay. This is the conclusion that he comes up with. This is how he rationalizes in his mind that he's going to get his lick back. If I can't find out the individual, I get them all. It's not possible. It's not possible. You know how they say rage will blind you? The rage that he had blinded him to make him think he could take on the cartel. It's not possible, man. The military don't want to take on the cartels. And if they do, they coming with it. They coming with helicopters. They coming with the grenade launchers. They coming with missiles. They coming hard. So one man can't take on the cartel and win. Not when he got a son that's in the next room sleeping, that's learning English and that he brought here for a better life, a better opportunity. He can't win. So when I asked him, I said, well, once you realized that you couldn't win, what did you do? He said, Joe, I had to make sure that when the day came, my son was going to be straight and that he was going to be able to have the life that me and his mama wanted for him. And from that day forward, I went all in. And if I couldn't get the person that killed my wife, I was going to brutalize everybody else. Now listen to what I'm saying now. Because he couldn't get revenge on the individual or the organization that was responsible for his wife's death, he turned his anger on the world. He turned his anger on the world and became a full-fledged, listen to me now, I want you to understand how sick this is. And became a full-fledged participant in the degradation, the humiliation of another human being. He didn't care anymore because he felt powerless to do anything about his wife's murder. He became a monster. He became a monster. it didn't dawn on him to walk away. Because I asked him, I said, why not just walk away? He said, and do what? That's what he said to me, and do what? I said, take the money that you had and start over. He said, it don't work that way. I said, well, tell me how it worked then, Hector. How does it work? He said, once you in with the cartel, you in with the cartel. I'm going to explain that to you in the rest of this story when we come back, y'all. This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all.
I've been trying to breathe underwater. What?